Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Ethereum Bangkok event 2022. My name is Max Simple. I'm the co-founder of Atato. Atato, we are a crypto custody company based in Singapore and in Thailand. And we have been organizing this event since 2019. It's the third time that we are doing it. And last time was a lot of people. In 2019, a bit less because it was a bear market. So there is some kind of similarities on where we are today, but we are always trying to basically promote Ethereum, the company is building on it, and basically explaining what's happening in the space and where we are heading. So this year we are super proud to also welcome a lot of the biggest name in the Ethereum space, starting with one of the OGs, as we say about Ethereum ConsenSys. I'm going to make the introduction a bit later, but at the end of the day, this event is done for the community. Atato is not an event company, but it's a tech provider. And we just try to promote the Ethereum ecosystem and what's happening in it. So without further ado, I'm very proud to welcome Marouen Zelleg from ConsenSys, and we're going to start with the fireside chats. Later on, there will be some panel on DeFi, GameFi, infrastructure, also the ecosystem in Southeast Asia. So stay tuned, join us. And yes, you can also join us on Facebook Live, with most of the people are going to join this event. And all those sessions will be recorded and on our YouTube channel. So without further ado, hi, Marouen, how are you?
Hi, Maxime. I'm good. I'm saying hello to everybody from Singapore, although hopefully I'll be in Bangkok tonight. So I'll be there for a week or so. Happy to also meet the community on some of the events going on there.
Right, but thanks a lot. Yeah, we hoped to be able to do it in person. I think it's going to be the last one in, I would say, online. Hopefully we can meet everyone next year. But Marouen, I mean, ConsenSys is part of the original companies building on Ethereum. Can you, for the few people who might not know what is ConsenSys, can you give us an introduction?
Sure. So I think the one important thing, of course, at the beginning to establish that ConsenSys is a leader in the Ethereum technology, right? So ConsenSys, first and foremost, is a technology software company. We have a few other things that we do. And so ConsenSys essentially started as a company providing tools for the developers and the users to access Ethereum, to interact with Ethereum, to build applications on Ethereum. It's a company that has been around for a couple of years. There is a fair number of employees distributed around the world. And then a couple of products that you may actually heard about in the market. So you may not heard the ConsenSys name, but you probably know about Metamask. So Metamask is one product that is built and essentially developed by ConsenSys. There is also, for example, Infura, which is a development platform also built and developed by ConsenSys. And if you see the goal of these two products, these are probably the key products. One of them is making it easy for the users to interact with Ethereum, and then the other one is making it easy for builders to build for Ethereum. So this hopefully is creating a cycle that will grow the Web3 ecosystem and then bring more applications and more people into the system. ConsenSys, of course, is evolving through the years, and so you would see probably recently a bit more involvement into the L2 space, also into some of the non-EVM space that we are contributing software and tools in that area. And between all this, there is a bunch of research and cool things that you're doing, and I'll be happy to talk about some of them in the next few minutes.
Sure, but thanks a lot for the introduction. And often for people we are referring to ConsenSys, it's a bit like the Microsoft of Web3. Is it a good similarity or not?
Minus the centralization. So many of the products that we are developing for and foremost focus on like no lock-in, user ownership. So those are a bit of the principles of Web3 that we hope to see grow in the ecosystem.
All right. And so you mentioned some of those softwares, Infura, Metamask, Truffle, and others. And you're already at the core of the development of Ethereum. And I would like, this year we had a major event happening for Ethereum, which we call the Merge. Yeah. And I would like to have your take on this. How do you think it's going to affect Ethereum? And did you see any change on the implication of the development?
Yeah. Now, as many of the people on the call hopefully know, the merge has been in the works for a few years, from concept to implementation to testing, and then it has successfully rolled out late this year. From a technology feat, it's actually quite amazing to see a bunch of developers coming in and then working in a decentralized way and rolling a major software upgrade with zero downtime. And that actually, I personally was like watching it. It's the lamest thing to watch on screen, but it's quite fun to see these things happening. Now, obviously, the merge is important for a couple of reasons. Perhaps the one that is a bit more technical is around the improvements it brings to security of the ecosystem, of the network itself, changing actually the incentives from energy-hungry incentives to financial incentives. And this, as a secondary or even primary impact, it helps with the perception of Ethereum, right? So a lot of people see blockchain as a major energy polluters, consumption-wise, and carbon footprint. And so with the merge, that has changed the perception, and of course, a bit more communication education will continue changing that perception. So having Ethereum moving into a green energy, into a more secure, is probably the first step. But then obviously there is a few things that are still in the works, right? So the roadmap is still long. But if we were to summarize, like probably the three major things to fix or improve in the next few years, it would be really the scalability. So today, even with the merge, we're still able to only handle a relatively small number of transactions. So we want to see that growing to the hundreds of thousands or even more if possible. There is a few initiatives happening around that one. Probably the next stage of the surge will focus on that. The rollups are also helping with that. So we'll see how that goes. The other thing that no denying is the user experience is still actually not terrific right now for the normal people to interact with Ethereum, either from a development point of view or from actually wallet and access and login. And so, of course, a few initiatives are in the works in that one to improve the user experience, perhaps with things like account abstraction, or looking at maybe gas optimization and having more predictable spend essentially when you interact with the network. Yeah. And the last thing to look into, and we're actively looking into it, is the privacy of the transaction. So blockchain by nature is quite transparent. You can see everything, but that is a bit limiting in certain use cases, right? So if you want to really transact in a trustless manner, but keeping some privacy in certain data points, how do we do that? And that's probably where a lot of enterprises are a bit reluctant to push on a mainnet, because they believe that some of the use cases in the enterprise space require privacy. So a lot of work with the ZK proofs happening in this space as well to really improve the privacy and find ways for us to interact without having to put everything on chain, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, this is essentially the three major areas that the teams are building on, from I believe from the Ethereum core developers and foundation, but also from technology providers like ConsenSys. This translates to providing tools and software, essentially, for the users to have more private interactions, for developers to build with a better user experience.
All right, and but thanks for sharing a very detailed explanation after the merge. But one thing that, are you seeing like more young developers still coming into the space? I mean, obviously you might know those metrics with the softwares and that you are providing. Is it something that you are seeing, or you're seeing a downside for the past few months related to the crypto market?
No, I think it has been fairly stable in terms of the growth of developers. Probably one of the metrics that we look at internally is the number of accounts that are being created on Infura, which is probably the first step. If you want to deploy a dApp, how to deploy, you'll find Infura guides. And so those numbers have grown. We are way past the 500,000 developers. I think the public announcement last time is 450,000, wow. But we are way past that, and it's still growing. Obviously, there is a bit of nuanced approach. So we are seeing developers building on different chains, perhaps building more on L2s, a bit more interest in ZKs. So, there is also behavior change within the core group of developers. But generally speaking, actually, a lot of people are still kind of building new initiatives and experimenting with few use cases.
All right. Yeah, that's it's good to know. And before we go to talk a bit about Metamask, which has been on the news recently, I just would like to, something which was very important in Thailand in the past few years, you were involved in the Central Bank Digital Currencies program, right?
Yep.
And also ConsenSys as a company has been involved in major CBDC development in different countries. So can you just update us where are we? Are we going to see a CBDC in such country anytime soon? Or if you can share a bit on this part.
Yeah, so for context, actually, ConsenSys has been involved in a few CBDC pilots over the last couple of years. There was a few softwares that we have used, few tools, few projects that we've done jointly with partners and with central banks. And these pilots have led to a lot of learning that ourselves and the central banks have gathered. We are kind of like doing a little bit less of it right now because we believe like for the last amount of learning, there is a lot of lessons that we took, and now it's about internalizing and finding what do we do with them and what would be the next iteration.
Yep.
When I was, I think yesterday, talking to a friend about this, I came across an amazing website called CBDC Tracker. Right?
Oh, really?
Yeah, cbdctracker.org,
Okay.
which has a beautiful like dashboard that visualizes where the stage is. But to give people a bit of summary, like apparently there is two launched CBDCs in the Bahamas and Jamaica, and there is about 13 in pilot stage. But then the most interesting thing is that almost every country is at least in research stage, right?
Okay.
And so it's really good to keep seeing these initiatives, and from the website you can tell which software they're looking at, whether they're using a DLT or not, because CBDC does not necessarily mean blockchain. So all of these nuances are there. I don't know. I think actually we'll see how it takes us. We don't want to open a big parenthesis, but there is a bit of concerns around the privacy and what use cases money programmability brings into society, like, you know, for example, forced spending, non-savable money, all of these things. And so it's not so much about building the CBDC pilot or the technology, but actually the citizen adoption, right?
Yeah.
And this will take probably two main things. The first one is some experiments to show that the usefulness of CBDC outweighs, you know, the control of the government. I think in the FinTech Festival in Singapore a couple of weeks back, there was an interesting thing where they gave vouchers that you can spend at specific merchants.
Okay.
I have my personal take. It was a bit clunky. Like the cashiers didn't know how to cash them essentially, so the queue was a bit too long.
We are still a long way from adoption, right?
We're still a long way, right? So essentially, of course, yeah, you have to make sure that the UX, the usability is worth the pain or worth the control the governments will get. And obviously through education or maybe through privacy tools, as a citizen, I can know that, yes, the government gave me a currency, but then they cannot really see everything that I'm doing with that. So still some work really to be done for it to be adopted at a mass scale. All
right. Okay. And so as you were mentioning, so ConsenSys used to be, I mean, still is a software development company, but you seem to focus most on your most well-known product, which is Metamask, right? Is it correct?
So essentially, we did a bit of look inside internally, maybe like mid this year, after the first market crash. And the thing that happens with a summer run is that every idea sounds like a good idea. So you're building everything and you're rolling all of the projects, all of the tools, everything is exciting. But then with the winter, you kind of look and say, okay, what's really bringing value as a use case and so on. And so for us, we looked at internal tools and software that we have, and really two major things that came as goals. We have to improve the user experience. So yes, Metamask is the leading product for that one. We have a few initiatives, particularly with the Metamask Snaps, which I invite you to look into, that is allowing the community to build extensions on top of Metamask to improve things, right, that Metamask itself cannot do today. Perhaps like a password recovery, or you want to have 2FAs, or you want to interact with chains that we don't interact with, or give a better UX to the user, right? So yes, Metamask is driving a lot of work through that. But then also we are trying to improve the developer experience equally with Infura. Okay. And so Infura perhaps is a bit more silent, but then we are rolling out more chains that are supported today for specific use cases. I think the latest one was Silo, which is a bit particular for banking, transfers, and international remittance. We are looking at enhanced developer tools as well. So yeah, these are the two major things that we will be spending more time on.
And you mean Infura supporting other EVM chains, right?
Of course, yeah. So we have quite a good adoption right now happening on Starknet. We're working with the likes of Immutable. on that, a few other projects running on that. Near ecosystem as well is coming on board. We are seeing some projects that are probably bridges to the enterprise adoption. For example, I think Nomura Bank has announced that they're going to be doing asset trading on the Orderly network. Orderly network is on the Near protocol. Orderly is working with us as well. So all of these actually interconnected participants are enabled by the developer infrastructure that we provide. So yeah, externally looking, it's probably Metamask and Infura. A lot of things are happening. But then also there is a lot of experiments happening in semi-internally, but also you can hear about them. We're very aggressive on the DAO research. There is a few DAOs that are being built within ConsenSys and expanding outside, a few partnerships with like Bankless DAO, etc. We have launched a Metamask grants DAO. That is quite an interesting experiment where the employees themselves also try to, of course, learn how DAOs can participate in voting and governance, but it brings essentially opportunities for people to get grants when they're building on Metamask labs. And last but not least, we are going to roll out a testnet for ZK EVM in a couple of weeks. There will be batches of users that already signed, the sign-up page just went away right away. We have 5,000 users that are going to be in the first batch with a few apps that are being deployed. And then hopefully in the next weeks, we'll just add more users and try to learn actually what's the possible use cases, what works, what doesn't work in a ZK EVM space.
Well, a lot of announcements. You've been busy, right? But
it's building season, yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, you have been busy with something else, and I think it's the elephant in the room, right? During those past few weeks, there was kind of a backlash on IP addresses being collected by Metamask and Infura. Can you explain what is it about? Is the public getting it wrong? And yeah, if you can just enlighten us a bit on this hot topic.
Sure. First of all, don't read Twitter. No, actually, it's a valid things that sometimes people actually highlight, and Twitter, of course, is a great channel for that. And it's responsibilities for a company like ConsenSys to make things clear, right, to the users. To put it in simple words, essentially there is a tool which is Metamask everybody's using today. So ConsenSys does not run Metamask. Metamask is a tool that users adopt and they control. They have full custody of how the software works and how it behaves, etc., etc. However, to make things easier for users and for developers, Metamask has some default settings. One of the default settings is that it uses Infura as a blockchain data provider in the back, right? And so Infura essentially is the one that is responsible for receiving requests from users and sending them back responses. For anyone who's familiar with web technologies, if you send me a request and you want to receive a response, I need to know where you sent it from. So I need to know your IP address, right? And because the request probably is submitting a transaction to the blockchain, it probably includes your wallet address as well, your blockchain address. So the big dilemma was like, oh, you are collecting this IP address and wallet address, which got highlighted because we wanted to be transparent. So we wrote it in our T's and C's and somebody picked it up. And that's how the whole thing started. Now, the real question is really, what do we do with that IP address, right? It's not so much about collecting it because that's how the internet works. So how much do you keep it in your database? What do you do with it?
And I think you touched something like very important because we talk about decentralizations. The main issue on Web 2 is actually centralized companies collecting data and reselling them. So yeah, happy for you to clarify what's.
No, for sure. So, for example, these questions will never be asked of Facebook. I mean, Facebook even collects your IP when you're not using it. So I actually disconnected from Facebook like a couple of weeks back. It's just when I read the T's and C's, I was like, okay. So anyway, so at this stage, we are getting that IP address, but the real question is like, what are we doing with it? We made the public announcement, which is actually, we're not doing anything with it. We're not monetizing it at all. But that's more on the vibes of trust me, bro, which is actually we've seen doesn't work so much recently. So there is actually a couple of things that we are doing internally, and you probably see a few announcements, radical announcements in the next couple of days. But it will really be around, okay, how are we collecting the IP? What are we doing with it, et cetera, et cetera. And really in the spirit of decentralization, the fact that Metamask today, you can completely switch it from Infura is a proof that actually we are not really trying to lock the user into an ecosystem and collect the IP, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it has been a bit of let's say a rocky couple of weeks, or a couple of days from the announcement, stemmed a little bit from lack of understanding of how web technologies work, but also perhaps, something that we have to clarify ourselves, and then hopefully in the next couple of days or a week, you'll hear a bit more.
All right, but thanks for explaining. And yeah, obviously what you see on Twitter needs a bit more digging, right? But you touched something very important. Like obviously we go into Web3 because we like decentralizations. We are expecting new decentralization and new dApps, not only on finance, on social media, and so on. So people were quite concerned on Metamask being the #1 wallet in the world. I don't know if you can share how many users do you have or active wallet?
Haven't checked for a while, but I think the last announcement was like 30 million, probably a little bit less with the winter, of course. But yeah, it's highly adopted. So I think it's good as a point to be brought up to the community, because I think now the same question is being asked from other wallets as well, from other RPC providers. So it's something that Web3 people took for granted. But now actually there is some tools. I think there is an interesting page from Chainlist that ranks the RPCs by what they're collecting, what they're not collecting.
Okay.
There is a bit more awareness about this. Yeah, I mean, everybody's doing it in a way. The real question is like, what are you doing with my data, right?
Yes, that's
we need the data, but what we're doing with it. But yeah, now actually more awareness, and companies are a bit more accountable to answering and clarifying this.
All right. And yeah, talking about the main subject of those past few weeks as well is like, you know, what happened with FTX, right? Did you see like people like a surge in registration of MetaMask or anything which is related to people looking at more decentralized applications, or no impact and just on the trading?
You would think actually that's how the user behavior will go, but I guess in economic and social behavior, it's a bit more complex than that.
Yes.
So to put it simple, you can see, for example, a surge in registrations, but also a surge in off-ramping of assets and less participation, right? So for example, I create a MetaMask wallet to get my money off crypto.com or whatever it is, but then I'm actually gonna take that money completely off the blockchain. And so I think there is definitely metrics going up, and I spoke to a few DeFi protocols as well. They're seeing a slight surge in interaction, a bit more curiosity about how they work. But I think the shock is still fresh. And so what people are doing right now is more of like, let me hold on to my assets, let me take my time on any decisions, and hopefully spend the next few weeks learning about, okay, what's the difference between a centralized exchange and a decentralized finance? And how can I be more self-custodian, more independent?
Okay.
So yes, it's not an immediate result. I think the negative effects of the FTX saga will take a while to show up, but also the positive effects will take a while to show up as well. So hopefully we'll see that in the next few months.
All right, but thanks for clarifying. And yeah, people don't realize that a bear market is an opportunity. We have seen that back in 2018, 2019, everybody was reading on the media that everything shut down, like crypto adoption was basically stopping. But you and I, we've seen basically the most improvement and the most development happening during the bear markets. Are you expecting the same for this one, or did you see any institution backlash on what's happening?
I think the bear market makes it a bit more leaner, let's say, for organizations to build. If anything, I think there is a lot of smart people in the Web3 space. And so what they do, they look at what happened and they try to learn from it. So if we summarize a little bit, for example, the awareness around self-custody because of FTX, the limitations of Ethereum through scalability or privacy and security, the hacks that happen as well, highlight a little bit the responsibility for protocols as well as softwares to be more secure and less foolproof. And so a lot of people actually are looking at these things and they're building. It's just that the harder part, I think it becomes a bit more difficult to raise. You'll have to be a bit more conscious about your investments of time and efforts and features, and you have to really focus on something particularly useful for you and for your users. And so I'm still seeing a lot of projects, to be honest, really focusing on these two things, which is a way to improve UX. So for example, how do I bring complex DeFi to normal users? There is one particular protocol, I'm not going to name a few, but there is a particular protocol that had this tool to build complex strategies for DeFi. It has the good community, but now because of this interest in DeFi, they actually built a second app that is a bit a light version and much more simpler for somebody to connect their wallet and do yield farming, right? And it does the strategies behind. So these kind of focusing on UX improvements are there. There is a high adoption of tools to build wallets to build dApps without coding. So this is also like the low code, no code aspect is there. There is, of course, a lot of growth in terms of like custody solutions, self-custody versus custodial, more options, more ease of use around there. And then also like I'm starting to see a bit of specialization whereby now projects can really put themselves into a segment and say, okay, we are DeFi, we are, let's say, yield farming within DeFi. So it really defines what they're doing and they start improving that through iterations. We are NFTs, but NFTs is a big word. So what are we within NFTs? We do this thing and then they start iterating within that segment. So this creates really highly focused teams building on specific verticals. And then the ecosystem looks at these teams and say, well, what do they need? They need security tools, they need monitoring tools, they need building tools. And yeah, just build it and they will come. That's kind of like the perspective at this point.
Yeah, as a custodian, we are seeing it as well. Like people really start talking about security and taking their security a bit more wisely. But I would like to talk to you. You have been in about institutions, through Metamask institutionals or with the institutions that you are working on. Obviously, we hear and we read a lot that they have been scared about the latest FTX collapse. But are you seeing that? Do you still seeing them building and so on?
Definitely, I think so. A couple of things, right? Of course, the merge have generated some positive views on the readiness of Ethereum as an ecosystem, but also really the major work is being done by the L2s, which and perhaps like Polygon as well as an L1. So they are doing a lot of amazing work that positioning them to serve this enterprise space very well. And so these things are things like, for example, they have actual BD teams that will go to the companies.
Surprisingly, for a Web3 project.
But then also, like, once the company gets interested, like the enterprise gets interested, there's a few things like, for example, predictable gas that makes them really go on these chains. I always do this analogy, which is like, imagine you, I give you a computer and then computer to run your applications or build applications on it. But in the morning, the battery lasts 1 hour and in the evening, it lasts 3 hours, right? You would never use it, right? It's not a good computer. And so things like predictable gas or gasless transactions, kind of very important for enterprise. And that's where the L2s are really coming quite nicely. If you want to see the interest of enterprises, I mean, look at the amazing work that Polygon is doing with a lot of big names like Starbucks, Adidas, Meta, Reddit, all of them building there. Exactly, so definitely there is that momentum there. Now, there is always difference as well between tech crypto and money crypto. So yes, perhaps like the money institutions are a bit more careful right now into pushing funds into the space. But then from a tech point of view, if I want to build a loyalty program or if I want to build a supply chain tracking on a green chain with 0 gas fees, I think there is a lot of work being done in that space. And last but not least, I think some of the interesting projects that happen, I'm particularly a fan of how the framing of Reddit NFTs happened. No mention of NFTs, digital collectibles. It makes it understandable for the common, marketing manager of the company. They can kind of reiterate that internally, get the funding, build something similar without having to deal with the complexities of what's an ARC token, etc. Yeah,
it was a very interesting experiment. Actually, it's one of the most successful NFT launch that happened in the past year, right? Before we still have 5 minutes, and this is something I'm going to ask all the panelists today. Basically, is like, what are you expecting for 2023? But what are you most excited about Ethereum long term as well? So I think it's a broad question.
Yeah, it's very broad, very broad. What I'm very excited about is really to take a break end of this year. I think it has been a wild year, but also breaks are very important for us as an ecosystem whereby you can sit and really summarize a little bit of your learning from 2022. And then that probably shapes what will happen in 2023. Right. So if we look at the major themes, it has been this whole thing around centralization versus decentralization. What have we learned from that? Potentially that will drive a little bit more use cases that will bring that decentralization more into the forefront of the user mind when they choose a service or something like that, when a builder is building. Also a bit more awareness around money crypto and tech crypto, right? why am I in this space? Am I to speculate on tokens, or am I really to find useful use cases powered by technology? This is something that we have to think about. I think also the global economy with a major number of tech layoffs, some companies pushing back for centralization, asking employees to come back to offices.
Yeah.
Hopefully will set the stage for people to look into DAOs more thoroughly and look at an alternative way of working, alternative way of contributing, an alternative way of making money. There is a lot of, amazing talent nowadays that, of course, just needed this push to say, you know what, actually, I don't need to go back to the office and work for a tech company building some ad thing. Can I take my skills and then contribute to a community or to a project and still make money and, of course, feed my family in that? So that's an area as well that I'll be betting on a little bit for next year. And then finally, I think we have all the responsibility to educate the person next to us, to bring them into the space. So I'll probably see a few more initiatives around education, maybe, materials and campaigns of how people can interact with the tools out there. What can they do with them? So yeah, I wish I had a particular answer of what would be all working on in 2023. But at this stage, on December 2nd, what about like taking a week or two, see, okay, what did we do in 2022? What worked, what did not work? Yep. And then learn from there, and what are the areas that we should push a bit more, right?
Okay. And I have one last question, and it's a very biased one, is that for the past few years, we have been talking about different layer one, so Ethereum versus others, many names, Solana, Polkadot, whatever. Do you think the layer one war is over, or is an Ethereum one, or do you expect still to see some layer one popping up in the next few years?
I think actually there is some interesting projects still happening as an alt layer one that bring an advantage for a period of time until Ethereum ecosystem fixes it. And so those will always continue building, or because they have a community. There is a lot of, there is no hiding, there's a lot of cult thinking in the Web3 ecosystem. And so people would use a technology or a particular ecosystem just because that's it. That's the t-shirt they wore to the game. They're going to stick with it, right?
Yeah.
For me personally, and this is just my personal opinion, it has always been clear to me that you need a base layer that has all of the primitive for security and trust and decentralization, etc. And then you can start specializing through things on top of it, right? And improving with dedicated experiences. Am I building a game? Am I building a financial product? Am I building something for enterprise? And then have these pillars able to talk to each other and interact, because the digital economy is very interlinked, right? And so I really think that it only makes sense to have one of this major ecosystem.
Agree.
We will always have alternatives to improve, and it's good. That's actually a good part of the engineering approach, that you always try to improve what you see doesn't work somewhere else, and then building something new. The healthy competition is good. But then if we really want to accelerate the space, then we have to start building this connected ecosystem that is founded on one unifying layer underneath.
All right, but thanks a lot, Marouen, for sharing, especially on the MetaMask point that has been quite in the recent news. We really appreciate you taking the time. ConsenSys has been as I mentioned, one of the OGs of the blockchain space, and continuing building the community. So really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us and basically to start this Ethereum event. Yeah, I hope that we can see you in Bangkok anytime soon.
Thanks, Maxime, and I really commend you and your team for organizing this and leading the community in Bangkok. I'm sure a lot of interesting projects happening there. Cannot wait to see some of them face to face. So thank you for organizing this.
Thanks a lot. And yeah, you gave me my transitions. The next panel is actually on people building on Ethereum in Thailand. It's going to be the Ethereum ecosystem in Southeast Asia. So we're going to start in 5 minutes. All right. Thank you.